So what was it again? Was it Todd?
Scott.
Scott. Okay. So Scott, do you mind if we just film it?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cool. So Scott, what do you think happens after someone dies?
Well, that's the age-old question, isn't
Yeah,
it?
the million-dollar question.
Being more of a scientific versus religious bent,
Okay.
my beliefs are more along the lines of the conservation of energy,
Okay.
where that you as a entity continue to exist, just not in the form that you're in now.
Okay.
I don't necessarily believe in a heaven or a hell or a typical religious spiritual
Okay.
afterlife, but I do believe there's more beyond this.
Okay. So like your soul or something, your spirit will go
Sure.
somewhere?
Absolutely.
Where do you think that is?
I don't know. I'm looking forward to finding out.
Okay.
But I don't believe in any of the Christian or Hindu or the whole recycling of the spirit.
Okay, like reincarnation or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not really following those beliefs.
Okay.
But I do believe there's more for us after we shuffle off this mortal coil.
Okay.
As they say.
Yeah.
They just don't know what it's going to be.
Okay. So so you don't believe in heaven or hell? Do you believe in God though?
I'm not an atheist. I'm what most people would call an agnostic.
Okay.
Whereas
So not sure.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, I think it'll be interesting to find out.
Would you consider yourself to be a good person?
Oh, absolutely. I believe wholeheartedly that you can be a moral person with strong ethics, and it's all about how you relate to other people. I'm more of a humanist than
Okay.
a Christian or other form of religion. But
Okay.
yeah, you can be a good person and not necessarily believe in God.
Okay. Can I ask you a few questions to see how good you are?
Sure.
Okay. Question 1: how many lies have you told in your whole life? Do you think?
Hard to tell.
Like more than 10?
Oh, sure. I
Just like me.
think they're the little white lies that you tell people to simply make relations between people easier.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you-
Yes, your baby's beautiful when it's really kind of.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure.
Have you ever told other ones maybe not just white lies, but maybe like an actual lie?
Oh, sure. I mean,
Okay.
we all have.
Right. Okay.
We all have. Never one that I think would cause any direct harm to anyone or anything of that nature. But yeah, there are times when it's easier to lie, sometimes to tell the truth. I live in a very what we call the Bible Belt in the South,
Yeah.
in the U.S.
Oh, you live down there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
And,
okay.
and being not a strong Christian,
Okay.
that can be a bit of a challenge sometimes. So sometimes it's easier to say, yeah, I'm a Christian than
Just
to
kinda
to
go with-
argue
go
it
with
out.
the
Yeah,
flow.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. So what do you call somebody, Scott, that tells lies? What do you call that person?
Well, sometimes we call it a liar.
Okay.
Sometimes there's lots of different terms for them.
But liar.
Liar is one.
Okay.
Sure.
Next question: have you ever stolen anything in your whole life, even if it was small? Like downloading music off the internet, or
Actually, I specifically don't do that. I haven't had
Okay.
a real problem with that.
oh, good. Anything ever like?
I do remember stealing one thing as a child.
Okay.
And I felt so guilty I confessed it, and we actually went back and returned it.
Same.
Wow. You got a good heart.
Yeah. I just it's one of those things. It's the difference between right and wrong.
Okay. Yeah. So what do we call someone that steals things?
Well, they're called a thief.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever used God's name in vain? You know what that means?
I have. Yeah. I'm sure I have.
Like oh my GD.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
When surprised, when
Yeah.
you know,
Or
I
excitement
was
or something.
yes.
or-
Yeah, and I was raised in a Christian household. I chose not to follow those beliefs, but sometimes when surprised or shocked or hurt,
Right.
sometimes it's really easy to just let that slip. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the Bible calls that blasphemy.
Blasphemy.
We're using the name like
Or a
gave us
blasphemer,
life.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gave us life, and we're using it in place of a cuss word or
Sure.
use excitement.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Jesus said, whoever looks at a woman to lust after her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Have you ever looked at another person with lust?
Oh, sure.
You're,
Sure.
you're a red-blooded male, I'm assuming you have. I have. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So Scott, by your own admission, and I'm not judging you because I fall into the same thing, you'd be a liar, a thief, a blasphemer, and an adulterer at heart. Do you think that's the definition of a good person?
I think if you follow strictly the Christian beliefs, then no, I would not be considered a good person.
Okay.
And I have trouble with the belief that if you look at someone, find them attractive and lust after them, you're adultery.
Okay. But it's not so much the look. Like if I look at a girl and say, "Oh, she's pretty," that's not lust. But if I sexually desire her and kind of mentally undress her, that's lust. It's not just the look of appreciating
Sure.
beauty, It's more for like sexually desirable. That's what Jesus is saying.
But I think being a good person is having the self-control to not act on those passions, on those desires.
Okay. But even God looks beyond the actions. He looks to
Again,
our heart.
you're putting your Christian beliefs as your measure against what my actions are, and I don't necessarily agree with those tenets or beliefs. So you and I have a difference of opinion.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So.
Again, living in the South,
Yeah.
if you were to put those definitions to those terms,
Yeah.
I would be considered a bad person.
Okay.
I've never harmed anyone in my life.
Okay.
I've never stolen from anyone.
Okay.
I may have lusted after women, but I've never acted on that
Okay.
passion.
Yeah.
Do I consider myself a bad person? No.
Okay.
A strict Christian probably would consider me a bad person.
Okay. I'm not a good person. So.
Sure.
So let's say at some
Well,
point.
and honestly, a Muslim would consider me a blasphemer and someone who deserves death. So
Okay.
it depends on your religious filter.
Okay. So at some point we're all going to die, right?
Sure.
Ultimate statistic is 10 out of 10 people die.
Well, we're all going to die eventually.
Right.
And nobody escapes this alive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So when you die, and if God were to judge you by His 10 Commandments, His standard of perfection, if He was to, do you think He'd find you innocent or guilty of breaking that?
If I was just judged
Okay.
on the 10 Commandments as they're written and as we as humans understand them, He would probably find me guilty. Right? So if I'm completely wrong, I may spend eternity in hell. I would like to believe that if there is a God, He would judge you on your entire life's actions, your good works as well as as just breaking those 10 Commandments.
Okay.
We do a lot of work for charity. We do a lot of work with children. There's a lot of other things that you do that I think balance the scale.
Okay.
And I would like to believe that a just God would weigh everything together.
Okay. So if He did find you guilty, what should He do with you? Heaven or hell?
That's up to Him.
Okay.
That's up to Him. Some religions would believe I'd be sent back to try again. The Christian faith would say I would go to hell for eternity. My own personal beliefs, given that I don't know if there is a heaven or hell, I don't know what will happen.
Okay.
But honestly, it's up to God. If there is a God, it's His, right?
Okay. So like He says every soul that sins shall die, and the wages of sin, or the payment for sin, is death. But He's made a way for us to escape that. Do you know what He's done for us?
I know where you're headed. Where you're headed. You can be saved. You can follow the Christian path, follow their strict tenets and morals, and end up in heaven and live eternally. I get that. I understand.
But do you understand that it was a legal transaction that took place? It's not just some religious Christian weird thing. It's a legal transaction that God actually had to do for us to be set free. Have you seen it that way?
No, I have not viewed it that way.
Okay. Can I share the analogy?
You can.
Okay. So let's say, Scott, you're guilty of a really serious crime.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? You're standing in the courtroom, you're guilty, they know it, you've admitted to it, they got
Sure.
video of you doing the crime, and the judge says, Scott, the penalty is $1 million fine or your life in prison. And I'm assuming if you're like me, you probably
I'm not
can't
going to be able
that.
to pay $1 million fine.
No, yeah.
Sure.
So while the bailiff is about to take you away for life or prison, jail for life, prison for life, someone walks into the courtroom that you don't even know, walks up to the judge's bench and says, Judge, I've sold everything that I have. I've given my whole life, and I love Scott, and here's his $1 million fine. So he puts that down on the table, and the judge can turn to you now and say, Scott, because your fine's been paid, I can legally let you go. Not because you could pay it, because you couldn't. Not because you were sorry, which let's say you were sorry, but I'm not going to let you off just because you're sorry. Because if a judge did that, he'd be corrupt, right?
Sure.
So he says, but because based on the legal requirement that it was $1 million fine, this person has paid it for you, I can now legally let you go. What would you think of that person that paid that for you?
I see the analogy you're drawing to Jesus Christ here and His
Okay.
sacrifice on the cross. Going back to your hypothetical situation, depending on who the person was who was attempting to sacrifice everything for me, depending on how I feel about that person, how well I know them, if I love them as well, I may well say, look, that is not fair. This person cannot pay for my crime.
Okay.
I am guilty. I've admitted I'm guilty. I should pay the penalty.
Okay.
Again, that's a moral dilemma.
Okay, but God doesn't want you to have to pay that fine. Even though we deserve it, we're criminals in His eyes because we've broken His law. So because He's just and good, He has to punish crimes.
Do you believe in a kind, just, benevolent God?
Yes.
Or do you believe in the retributional God from the Hebrew Bible.
Well, he's both. He's merciful, but he's also just.
Which one?
He's both.
He's both.
Yeah.
Okay.
So mercy and just come together at the cross. So God demonstrated His love for us
Okay.
at the cross.
I get your point. Again, if I believed what you believe
Yeah.
about that religion and that faith, I would agree with you.
Okay. But does it make sense, like that? Like why? Like if God being just and good, He can't let any crime go unpunished. Like we in our even our civil laws, if you know a murderer did something and like they just didn't get judged for it, that's not justice. That's not right. So if we're breaking God's
So
holy law,
but in the example you've just given, you are giving us the equivalent power and knowledge and wisdom of God. If God does exist, I would hope that we're inferior beings, that He is far above and beyond our understanding of things, and that He would find a way to be just and to be merciful and to be forgiving.
and that's what He's done through Christ.
Right.
Because like for me,
Okay.
because
We can stand here and argue for the next 4
Yeah, yeah.
hours. I don't believe in those tenets.
okay.
You can try to sell me, you can try to convince me. If I was a Christian,